I woke up to the low electronic beeping of a monitor and the sour smell of disinfectant that clung to the back of my throat. The ceiling tiles above me were stained and familiar in that generic hospital way, like they could belong to any city in America. My body felt like it had been rearranged without my consent. Every breath tugged at a deep, grinding ache in my side, the kind of pain that makes time slow down and sharpens every thought. Day 2 after surgery. That's what the whiteboard said. I stared at it longer than necessary, waiting for the fog in my head to lift. My phone buzzed on the tray table. No new messages. Just missed notifications from work and a reminder from my pharmacy app. Nothing from my family. I'd texted my mom and my sister when they rushed me into surgery. An emergency. No details. Just fear between the lines. My mom had replied with a praying hands emoji. That was it. 48 hours passed after that. 2 nights of pain meds, IV drips, nurses adjusting my blankets like I was something fragile and temporary. When the door finally opened, it wasn't relief I felt. It was something heavier. My sister stood there holding a takeaway coffee like she'd stopped by out of obligation, not concern. My mom hovered behind her, tired, careful, already defensive. No rush. No apologies. I realized then how quiet abandonment can be. Not loud or dramatic. Just delayed. Just late. Sitting in a hospital bed, staring at the door, learning exactly how optional you are to the people who taught you what family was supposed to mean. She showed up without knocking, like she always did. Rebecca, my sister, standing in the doorway with a paper coffee cup, and that same blank face I'd seen my whole life. No smile. No rush. Just a glance around the room, like she was checking an Airbnb she wasn't sure she liked. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside me, and the antiseptic smell clung to the air. Methodist Hospital, 4th floor. Day 2, after surgery. My body still felt like it had been dragged through gravel. "How are you feeling?" she asked. The words were right. The tone wasn't. It sounded rehearsed, like something you say because you're supposed to. She didn't look at my face when she asked. Her eyes drifted to the IV pole, the window, the TV mounted on the wall playing a muted daytime talk show. "Pretty great," I said, forcing a weak smile. "Living the dream." She nodded, like I'd just given her the weather report. Set the coffee on my tray without asking if I wanted a sip. No hand squeeze. No, I was worried. Just silence, heavy and awkward, filling the space between us. I waited for something, anything, that felt human. A joke. A memory. Even annoyance would have been better than this emotional dead zone. Part of me stayed alert, shoulders tight, watching every small movement. Another part, the old part, still hoped she'd soften. That she'd suddenly remember I was her brother, not a chore. Mom hovered behind her near the door, scrolling on her phone, pretending not to notice the tension. The room felt smaller with them in it, like the air had thinned. Rebecca cleared her throat. "Well," she said, already half turned away, "I just wanted to check in." Check in. Like I was a package. Or a box, she could tick. As they left, the door clicked shut too softly. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, realizing the visit hadn't hurt because it was cruel, but because it was empty. And somehow, that hurt more. The room smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind nurses forget on hot plates. I was half upright in the hospital bed, still foggy from pain meds, when Rebecca stepped closer. Her face didn't change, no anger, no concern. Just blank. I remember thinking that was strange, the way she kept staring past me like I was furniture. She reached for the IV pole. For one stupid second, I felt relief. I thought, finally, she's helping. Maybe she was straightening the line, checking the drip. Something normal. Something human. Then she grabbed the tubing and yanked. The pain was immediate and white-hot, sharp enough to punch the air out of my lungs. I gasped and jerked back as blood spilled down my arm, warm and fast, soaking into the thin hospital blanket. My heart slammed against my ribs. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, my voice cracking. She stepped back calmly, like she'd just closed a cabinet door too hard. "You moved," she said flatly. "It slipped." "It didn't slip." I knew that. She knew that. I looked at my arm, at the blood dripping onto the floor, and then at her face, still empty, still detached. The physical pain was bad, but it wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the realization settling in my chest. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. My mom stood frozen near the door, not screaming, not rushing forward. Just watching. When she finally spoke, it was quiet and useless. "I'll get the nurse." As they left, I sat there shaking, pressing my hand against my arm, trying to steady my breathing. In that moment, lying in a hospital bed, I understood something I'd been avoiding for years. I wasn't safe. Not even here. The moment that broke me wasn't the pain in my arm, or the blood soaking into the hospital blanket. It was my mother standing in the doorway. She didn't rush forward. She didn't shout for help. She didn't even look surprised. She just stood there, one hand on the door frame, body angled just enough to block the hallway. Like a human shield, not for me, but for my sister. "Mom," I said, my voice thin, almost embarrassed. "Get the nurse." She nodded slowly, the way people do when they want to appear calm. "I will," she said. Quiet. Controlled. Then she didn't move. Rebecca picked up her coffee like nothing had happened. My arm throbbed, warm and wet. Blood sliding down my skin. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to see me. Really see me. Her son in a hospital bed, 2 days out of surgery, shaking. Instead, she kept her eyes on the floor. "Please," I said. "Just step aside." She finally turned, but not toward me. Toward the hall. She positioned herself more firmly in the doorway, blocking the view, blocking the truth. Protecting the scene. Protecting Rebecca. In that second, something inside me collapsed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, irreversible crack. This wasn't confusion or shock. This was a choice. "We'll come back later," she said softly. Like she was the reasonable one? Like I was the problem. Then she left. Both of them did. I sat there alone, clutching my arm, listening to the beeping monitors, realizing the worst part wasn't what my sister had done. It was understanding that my mother had seen it, and decided I wasn't worth saving. That was the moment my trust didn't just break. It died. The nurse came in fast, the way they do when something is already wrong, and they're trying not to let it show. She looked young, maybe mid-20s, name badge swinging as she moved. One glance at my arm and her expression shifted, not panic, but focus. Professional concern. "What happened here?" she asked, already reaching for gauze. "The IV came out," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. She pressed the gauze against my arm, firm but careful. Blood soaked through almost immediately. She didn't comment on that. Instead, she examined the catheter, the tape, the torn edge of skin. Too precise? Too quiet. "These don't just come out," she said finally. I laughed once, short and hollow. It slipped." She looked at me then. Really looked. "Peripheral lines are secured," she said. "They're taped, stabilized. Someone has to pull them." The room felt smaller. The steady beep of the monitor grew louder, sharper. I stared at the ceiling tile with the faint water stain shaped like... My brain scrambled for explanations that didn't exist. "Who was in the room?" she asked. "My sister," I said. Then, after a beat, "and my mom." Her hands paused for half a second. Not long enough to be obvious, but long enough to matter. She resumed cleaning the wound, her movements brisk now, controlled. "Did either of them touch your IV?" she asked. I hesitated. That familiar instinct kicked in, the one that tells you to smooth things over, to protect people even when they don't protect you. I almost said no. But the image hit me, Rebecca's blank face. My mom blocking the doorway. Yes, I said quietly. My sister? The nurse nodded once, like something had clicked into place. I'm going to note this in your chart, she said. And if anyone touches your medical equipment again, you press that call button immediately. Do you understand? I did. For the first time since waking up from surgery, the confusion settled into something sharper. Clarity. I didn't say it out loud at first. I let the nurse finish taping the new IV to my arm, let her smooth the blanket like that small practiced kindness might steady me. She asked what happened in the room before she arrived. Her voice was calm, neutral, the way professionals speak when they already know the answer but need you to catch up to it. The IV came out, I said. Even then, I softened it. Passive. Safe. She looked at my arm, then back at me. These lines don't just fall out, she said gently. Someone has to pull them. The words landed heavier than the pain meds ever could. My heart started thudding, slow and loud, like it was knocking on a door I'd been keeping locked for years. I pictured my sister's face, blank, focused, almost bored, when she yanked the line. No panic. No apology. Just a quick correction. You moved. I swallowed. My mouth felt dry like I'd been breathing dust. My sister, I said. The word tasted wrong. She said it was an accident. The nurse paused, gauze in hand. Do you believe that? That was the moment. The exact second everything shifted. I could feel it in my chest, the way fear and clarity collided. I thought about my mom standing in the doorway, not rushing forward, not screaming for help, just blocking the hall. I thought about how normal it all felt in the worst possible way. No, I said. My voice shook, but it didn't break. It wasn't an accident. Saying it out loud scared me more than the surgery, more than the blood. Because once I admitted that truth, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't tell myself it was clumsiness, or bad timing or stress. It meant someone I loved had hurt me on purpose, and that I'd been trained my whole life to excuse it. The nurse nodded, already documenting. I lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, heart racing. I was terrified. But underneath that fear, something else was waking up. Awareness. And once it's awake, it doesn't go back to sleep. I didn't understand it all at once. The realization came in fragments, like memories surfacing when you're half awake. Slow, unwanted, undeniable. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, my mind started flipping backward. Not on purpose. It just did. I remembered 2020, the appendicitis. The way I woke up groggy, mouth dry, nurse standing over me with a tight expression. She'd asked if anyone had touched my IV. I laughed it off, said my sister had probably been trying to help. The word help felt smaller now. Then 2019 came rushing in. The kidney donation. My incision burning, the sheets speckled red. Rebecca had hugged me too hard, pressed her body against mine like she forgot what I'd just been cut open for. I didn't think, she'd said. Everyone nodded. Accidents happen. Families forgive. Except it kept happening. Each memory lined up neatly, like receipts I'd shoved into a drawer and pretended didn't exist. A nurse adjusting a drip that had already been adjusted. A warning note in my chart I never asked about. The way staff always seemed a little tense when my family visited, like they were bracing for something. And then, Saturday. Her hand on the IV line. The calm on her face. The blood. That's when the pattern snapped into focus, sharp and horrifying. These weren't isolated moments. They were rehearsals. And every time, I'd done the same thing. Minimized it. Explained it away. Protected her. Protected them. The chill that ran through me wasn't just fear. It was recognition. I hadn't been unlucky. I'd been conditioned not to see it. Linda Chen, the charge nurse, pulled a chair up beside my bed and sat down like this wasn't going to be a quick conversation. She didn't rush. She didn't soften her voice either. That alone made my stomach tighten. I looked through your chart, she said, tapping her tablet with one finger. Not just today, The last 5 years. I waited for her to keep going, my heart thudding loud enough I was sure she could hear it over the monitors. You've been hospitalized here 3 times, she continued. And each time there's a nursing flag tied to a family visit. Something unusual, something concerning. I swallowed. Flags? She nodded. It means staff noticed behavior that didn't sit right, equipment issues, bleeding that shouldn't have happened, medication adjustments that weren't authorized. She met my eyes. And every time the same visitor is documented. Rebecca. Hearing my sister's name said out loud, in that calm professional tone, made the room tilt. I stared at the white hospital blanket, suddenly very aware of the bandage on my arm, the new IV taped down like it needed extra protection. You told nurses before that it was fine, Linda said gently, but firmly. An accident, a misunderstanding. That's what I thought, I said, though my voice sounded thin even to me. She leaned forward. Mr. Torres, I've been a nurse for 23 years. Accidents happen, patterns don't. The word landed hard. Pattern. She explained that this wasn't about blame or family drama. It was about safety. My safety. She told me the hospital would document this as a potential risk going forward, that staff would be present if Rebecca returned. I nodded, but inside, everything felt unmoored. This wasn't just a bad moment anymore. It was a trail. A history I'd been stepping around for years, telling myself it was nothing. And suddenly, I couldn't pretend I was lost. I was standing right in the middle of something dangerous, finally seeing it for what it was. I found out in the quietest way possible, which somehow made it worse. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a late-night phone call. It was a sentence, spoken evenly by the charge nurse, like she was telling me the weather. She said there had been another incident. Years ago. Different patient. Different floor. A ventilator malfunction during end-of-life care. The patient survived. Barely. Then, she said my sister's name. My brain rejected it at first. Ventilators belong to IQs and headlines, not to family stories you tell yourself are just complicated. I remember staring at the corner of the ceiling, at the small black camera dome I'd never noticed before, while the nurse explained that security footage had shown a visitor adjusting equipment during visiting hours. Footage unclear. Intent unproven. Family declined to press charges. I asked who the patient was. She told me. My sister's ex-husband's mother. Something cold slid down my spine. Not panic. Not shock. Recognition. I thought back to Rebecca's face when she pulled out my IV wah. Blank. Focused. The way someone looks when they're unplugging a lamp, not hurting a person. I thought about how my mom had stepped into the doorway without a word, blocking the hall like it was instinct. The nurse stopped talking and waited for me to react. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady when I asked, "So this wasn't the only time?" She didn't answer directly. She didn't have to. That was the moment the story in my head finally collapsed. This wasn't bad luck. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was a pattern. And once you see a pattern like that, you don't get to unsee it. I lay there listening to the steady beep of my own monitor, suddenly aware of how fragile a human body really is, and how dangerous someone can be when everyone keeps calling them family. Jake showed up that evening with a six-pack he knew I wouldn't touch, and that look on his face, the one that meant he wasn't here to make me feel better. He dropped onto the chair by my hospital bed, glanced at the bandage on my arm, then back at me. "So," he said, quiet but sharp, "tell me exactly what happened." I told him. About Rebecca. About the IVY. About Mom standing in the doorway like nothing was wrong. I tried to soften it, the way I always did. Used words like accident and misunderstanding. Jake didn't interrupt. He just listened, jaw tight, eyes locked on the floor. When I finished, he let out a breath that sounded more tired than angry. "Marcus," he said, finally looking at me, "you know that's not okay, right?" I shrugged. "She's my sister." "That's not an answer," he shot back. "That's an excuse." The words hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Let me tell you something," he said. "When you protect people who hurt you, you're not being loyal. You're being useful to them." I felt my chest tighten. Every instinct in me pushed back. Family is family. You don't call cops. You don't make things worse. You keep the peace. Jake shook his head like he could hear my thoughts. "You think staying quiet makes you the good guy," he said. "But all it does is teach them there are no consequences." I looked at my arm. The fresh tape. The bruising underneath. "She didn't mean to." He cut me off. "Intent doesn't change impact." Silence filled the room. Not awkward. Heavy. Honest. For the first time, I let myself say it, just in my head. What if I wasn't protecting my family? What if I was abandoning myself? That realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt slow. Uncomfortable. Like waking up in a room you didn't recognize and realizing you'd been there for years. By Sunday night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I left it face down on the coffee table, but the vibration kept crawling through the apartment like a mosquito you can't kill. When I finally flipped it over, it was all from Mom. Missed calls. Texts stacked on each other. No questions about my recovery. No, "Are you okay?" Just explanations. Corrections. Control. "We're sorry you got upset. Rebecca feels terrible." Not Rebecca is sorry. Not what she did was wrong. Just that I reacted badly. When I didn't answer, she escalated. "It was an accident. You're being dramatic." That word landed harder than the IV ripping out of my arm. Dramatic. Long. Like pain is a performance. Like blood on hospital sheets is a misunderstanding if you don't scream loud enough. I could hear her voice in my head, calm and tired, the same tone she used my whole life when I tried to explain why something hurt. That sigh that said, "Why are you making this difficult?" I typed and erased 3 replies. My hands were shaking, jaw tight, heat climbing up my neck. Part of me still wanted her to see it, to finally understand. Another part knew better. She wasn't confused. She was managing the story. When I finally answered, I kept it short. She pulled out my IV. A nurse had to reinsert it. "That's not an accident. Don't come back." The typing bubbles appeared. Disappeared. Came back. "You're overreacting." There it was. The line she always used to shrink me back into place. I set the phone down and stared at the wall until the anger settled into something colder and clearer. This wasn't about facts. It never had been. It was about who was allowed to be hurt, and who was allowed to pretend nothing happened. And for the first time, I didn't apologize for taking up space. I didn't decide to get the footage all at once. It crept up on me, while I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles like they might give me permission. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and cold coffee. My arm throbbed where the IV had been torn out, newly bandaged, too clean for what had just happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my sister's face, blank, calm, like she'd unplugged a lamp instead of hurting me. The charge nurse had mentioned cameras, almost casually. "For liability," she'd said. The words stuck. Cameras meant memory that couldn't be argued away. Proof that didn't bend when people said, "It was an accident." "You're being dramatic." "You misunderstood." My phone was heavy in my hand. I opened the hospital website, scrolled past cheerful stock photos and patient testimonials until I found patient advocacy. The button hovered under my thumb. My heart started pounding, not fast, but hard, each beat deliberate. If I asked for the footage, there was no going back. This wasn't venting to a friend or journaling my feelings. This was paper trails, and forms, and people asking questions I'd spent my whole life avoiding. What if I was wrong? What if seeing it made it worse? I pressed the button anyway. The confirmation page loaded slowly. I read every word, twice. Date. Room number. Processing fee. My name typed back at me in black text, official, and exposed. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when I whispered, "Okay," to an empty room, was steady. I wasn't doing this to punish anyone. I was doing it because something in me had finally shifted. Because for the first time, being afraid mattered less than knowing the truth. And whatever that footage showed, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I watched the video alone at my kitchen table, laptop balanced between a cold cup of coffee and a stack of unopened mail. The file loaded slowly, like it was stalling on purpose. My reflection hovered in the dark screen for a second, pale, tired, bracing. Then, the room appeared. Hospital white. My hospital bed. Me, asleep, mouth slightly open, one arm taped with the IV line I trusted to keep me stable. The timestamp ticked forward in the corner. The door opened. Rebecca stepped in first. No rush. No hesitation. She didn't look worried. She didn't look angry either. Just focused. Like she'd come to finish a task. Mom followed a few seconds later. I leaned closer without realizing it. Rebecca stood at the foot of the bed, watching me sleep. Too long. 30 seconds, maybe more. Then, she moved to the IV pole. I remembered this part, how I'd thought she was being helpful for once. On screen, I saw my eyes open. My lips moved. Probably asking what she was doing. Her hand reached out. She didn't fumble. She didn't slip. She grabbed the line and pulled. My body jerked back in the bed. Even through the grainy footage, I could see the blood, dark against the white sheets. And then my stomach dropped for a different reason, because of Mom. She didn't rush to me. She didn't shout for help. She stepped into the doorway and turned sideways, blocking the hall. Shielding the scene. Buying time. I paused the video and pressed my palm flat against the table, like I needed to ground myself. The ache in my chest was heavier than the pain I'd felt in that hospital room. This wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was confirmation. The fear I'd tried to explain away had been right all along. And somehow, that hurt more than the blood ever did. I sat in a plastic chair bolted to the floor of the precinct lobby, the kind designed to make you feel temporary. The room smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. A TV in the corner played a muted news loop. No one was watching. I held my incident report in both hands, the paper already soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. When the officer finally called my name, he looked younger than I expected. Early 20s. Clean uniform. Tired eyes. We sat across from each other in a narrow room with a metal desk between us. I explained everything, slowly, clearly. The hospital. The IV. The footage. The pattern. I kept my voice steady because I knew the second I sounded emotional, it would be over. He nodded, typed, stopped typing. Then he leaned back in his chair. So, this is a family dispute, he said. Like that explained everything. I felt something drop in my chest. She pulled out my IV while I was recovering from surgery. Right, he said carefully. But there's no audio on the video. Hard to prove intent. These things get messy when it's family. Messy. That was the word. Not violent. Not dangerous. Messy die? I asked what would happen next. He shrugged. Said he'd file it. Said the dad probably wouldn't pursue it. Said I wasn't seriously injured, at least not by legal standards. I watched his pen roll across the desk and realized the conversation was already over. I walked back out into the afternoon sun feeling smaller than when I'd walked in. I hadn't been asking for revenge. I'd been asking to be taken seriously. Instead, I learned something sharp and lasting. The system listens differently when the person hurting you shares your last name. I sat in my car for a long time before turning the key, hands on the wheel, breathing through the kind of frustration that doesn't burn hot, it goes cold. The kind that teaches you you're on your own now. I didn't understand the timing at first. I was still foggy from anesthesia, still replaying the moment Rebecca's hand closed around my IV line like it was nothing more than a loose cord. I kept asking myself, why now? Why here? Why that level of cruelty when I was flat on my back in a hospital bed? The answer didn't come from a confession. It came from an email. 3 days after I was discharged, I opened my laptop at my kitchen counter. still wearing hospital socks, still moving like everything hurt. Buried between work notifications was a message from a law firm downtown. Formal, polite, cold. Rebecca was contesting our father's will. Filing date, 3 weeks before she walked into my hospital room. I stared at the screen until the words stopped swimming. 3 weeks. She'd already hired a lawyer. Already claimed I'd manipulated Dad while he was dying. Already decided I was her obstacle. And then she showed up at my bedside, coffee in hand, face blank, pretending to check my IV. That's when it clicked. The hospital visit wasn't about concern. It wasn't even about anger. It was strategy. If I reacted, if I yelled, shoved her away, caused a scene, there would be notes, records, erratic behavior. Something she could use later in court to paint me as unstable. Someone untrustworthy. Someone who didn't deserve what Dad left behind. But I hadn't reacted. I'd stayed still. I'd let the nurses see the blood, not my rage. Sitting there in my apartment, email glowing on the screen, I felt the shock harden into something colder and clearer. This wasn't sibling resentment spiraling out of control. This was calculated, planned. And suddenly, the attack in the hospital made terrible sense. She wasn't trying to hurt me emotionally anymore. She was trying to remove me from the picture. I didn't wake up that morning feeling brave. I woke up exhausted, hollowed out, the kind of tired that settles into your bones after weeks of pretending things are fine. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, full of missed calls I wasn't ready to hear. For the first time, I didn't reach for it right away. The decision came quietly. No dramatic music. No sudden surge of courage. Just a clear, steady thought. This stops with me. At the courthouse downtown, the air smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. The floors echoed with footsteps that didn't belong to me. I filled out the form slowly, my hands steady even when my chest wasn't. Each line felt heavier than the last. Name Dati. Date. Tawa. Relationship. Description of incident. Seeing it in black and white made it real in a way denial never had. I kept thinking about how many times I'd stayed silent. How often I'd explained things away to keep the peace. How family had been used like a leash instead of a bond. Letting go of that belief hurt more than the paperwork ever could. When the clerk stamped the documents, the sound was sharp, final. I flinched, but then I breathed. Deep. Full. Like my lungs finally had room again. Walking back to my car, the city looked the same. Traffic, sirens, people glued to their phones. But I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt raw. Sad. Angry in a quiet, controlled way. But underneath all of it was something new. Relief. I wasn't doing this out of revenge. I wasn't doing it to win. I was doing it because protecting someone who harms you isn't loyalty, it's surrender. And I was done surrendering pieces of myself just to make other people comfortable. That chapter closed the moment I chose myself.